I assumed it was a standard strategy update until I saw HR and a guard by the door. In 11 minutes, they erased 19 years of my work. But the firing wasn't the worst part. It was their immediate move to frame me as a scapegoat. My name is Logan Mitchell. I'm 49 years old. I'm the guy who built the Rapid Replenishment Division from a chaotic mess of spreadsheets into the single highest performing unit within Broadwell Retail Group. I spent 19 years memorizing the pulse of American logistics. I know exactly how long it takes a refrigerated truck to cross the Rockies in February. I know the names of the Port Authority managers in Long Beach and which ones pick up their phones on Sunday mornings. But none of that mattered inside the glass conference room on the 35th floor of our downtown Dallas headquarters. It was 6:15 in the evening. The air conditioning was humming with that specific sterile silence that only exists in corporate offices after everyone's gone home. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was lighting up. The highway was a river of red taillights and white headlights, a flow of commerce that usually comforted me. Tonight, it looked foreign. I'd been called for what the calendar invite termed a strategic alignment update. Vague title. I expected a discussion about fourth quarter targets or maybe a new vendor compliance initiative. I didn't expect the room to feel like an execution chamber. Mason Torres sat at the head of the mahogany table. He was 39 years old and had been our CEO for exactly 4 months. He still smelled like the strategy consulting firm he came from. His suit was tailored to surgical precision. His hands were manicured. He'd never driven a forklift. He'd never negotiated with a union steward on a freezing loading dock at 3 a.m. To Mason, the supply chain was a math problem, variables on a dashboard that could be optimized by moving cells in a spreadsheet. To his right sat Nicole Wells from Human Resources. I'd met her twice. She had the kind of face that was practiced in feigning empathy while remaining utterly detached. She looked at a spot on the table near my left hand, refusing eye contact. Standing by the door was the detail that made my stomach flip. A large man in a tight black polo shirt, not one of the regular security guards who smiled and asked about my weekend in the lobby. This guy stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the wall. He was there to escort a threat out of the building. With a jolt of cold adrenaline, I realized I was the threat. Mason cleared his throat. He didn't ask how I was, didn't offer water, just leaned forward, elbows on the polished wood, and began to speak in a smooth, practiced voice entirely devoid of humanity. Logan, thanks for coming up. As you know, Broadwell is undergoing significant transformation. We're moving toward a future defined by efficiency and automation. We've been reviewing the organizational structure of the supply chain divisions. I sat perfectly still. My hands were in my lap. I could feel the blood draining from my face, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd faced down angry Teamsters and furious vendors. I wouldn't let this guy see me flinch. We've decided to restructure the Rapid Replenishment Division. The current model is too heavy. It relies too much on individual intervention. It's not scalable. We're pivoting to a data-first operating model focused on algorithmic forecasting and removing the need for high-touch management. He paused, waiting for me to speak. He wanted me to argue. He wanted a reaction that would justify what he was doing. "You're firing me," I said. It wasn't a question. "We're eliminating your position effective immediately," Mason corrected. He loved euphemisms. "This is about reducing our dependency on legacy systems and, frankly, on legacy personnel. We need a leaner structure. We need to remove the human bottleneck." I was the bottleneck. 19 years of solving problems the computers couldn't see, and now I was the bottleneck. I looked at him. His expensive watch, his confident smile. He truly believed what he was saying. He believed that if you fed enough data into a server, you didn't need people who knew how to talk to other people. "Mason," I said, my voice steady, "the system works because my team knows what to do when the data is wrong. What happens when a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast? What happens when a rail strike shuts down the Midwest corridor? Algorithms don't negotiate with freight brokers during a natural disaster." Mason smiled, the condescending expression you give a child afraid of the dark. "That's exactly the mindset we're moving away from, Logan. We're building a predictive model that accounts for weather patterns and labor disruptions. We don't need heroic intervention. We need standardized, automated responses. We need to stop relying on gut feelings and start trusting the architecture." He had no idea, absolutely no idea. He spoke with the confidence of a man who'd never heard the phone ring at midnight with news that a warehouse had lost power. "You're making a mistake," I said. Not because you're firing me, but because you think you can run this company without the people who understand how the gears actually turn." Mason sighed, looked bored. He nodded to Nicole. The HR rep slid a single sheet of paper across the table face down. Then she slid a folded cardboard box toward me. "We've prepared a separation package," Nicole said in a robotic voice. "It's contingent on your signature and your adherence to the non-disparagement agreement. Your access to company systems has already been terminated." I instinctively glanced at my phone on the table. The screen lit up, then went black. A loading circle spun for a second, then the device reset to factory settings. All my contacts, all my emails, all the text messages from drivers and warehouse managers, gone. In the time it took Mason to explain his automation philosophy, they'd digitally erased 19 years of my existence. I was no longer the director of operations. I was just a guy in a room with 3 strangers. "Please place your badge and any company property on the table," Nicole said. I reached for my lanyard. My hands shook slightly, just a tremor in the fingers, but I controlled it. I unclipped the plastic rectangle that had opened doors for me for nearly 2 decades. I placed it on the mahogany. That small plastic click was the loudest thing in the room. "The box is for personal items you may have on your person. You will not be returning to your office. Security will clear out your desk and ship your personal effects within 48 hours. I looked at the box. Small, flat, insulting. "I don't have anything," I said. I stood up. The chair scraped against carpet. The security guard stepped forward, eyes locking onto me. "I'll escort you to the elevator," the guard said in a deep, flat voice. I looked at Mason one last time. He was already checking his phone. He'd moved on. I was a deleted line item. He was probably thinking about dinner. "Good luck, Mason," I said. "You're going to need it." He didn't look up. "Thanks for your service, Logan." 12 minutes. That's all it had taken. The silence in my car was suffocating. I sat in the parking garage for a long time, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. That silence was a luxury I hadn't known for nearly 2 decades. For 19 years, my life had been constant noise. Logistics, engines, conveyor belts, ringing phones. Now, in the stillness, my mind drifted back to the beginning. When I first walked into Broadwell 19 years ago, the company wasn't a well-oiled machine. It was a crime scene of inefficiency, stock price bleeding, supply chain hemorrhaging. We had inventory rotting in distribution centers while store shelves in the Midwest sat empty for weeks. Regional managers operated like feudal warlords, hoarding stock because they were terrified of missing their individual bonuses. I was 30 then, hired as a junior analyst. My job was reading weekly reports and highlighting variances. I did that for exactly 3 weeks before I realized the reports were fiction, sanitized fairy tales written by middle managers to keep their bosses from screaming. The numbers said our on-time delivery rate was 85%. The angry voicemails from store managers said it was barely 50%. So I stopped reading. I bought steel-toed boots and a heavy coat and went where the work actually happened. I spent 6 months in the field. I didn't announce visits, just showed up at distribution hubs in Memphis and Chicago and asked to speak to shift supervisors. I remember a guy named Preston Rodriguez who ran the night shift in our Ohio facility. He was a giant with grease under his fingernails and profound distrust of anyone wearing a suit. The first night I shadowed him, the conveyor system jammed. Standard protocol required logging a ticket with maintenance and waiting 4 hours for a technician. That meant 4 hours of downtime while trucks sat idle at bay doors. Preston didn't log a ticket. He kicked the sorter housing, reached in with a gloved hand to dislodge a splintered pallet, and got the line moving in 2 minutes. I wrote that down. First lesson, the manual was a suggestion. The mission was movement. I rode in cabs of 18-wheelers on overnight runs from Denver to Salt Lake City. Watched drivers chug lukewarm coffee and battle snowstorms that the planning software in Dallas didn't know existed. One driver told me he knew he'd be late the moment he saw cloud cover over the Rockies, but the system wouldn't let him update arrival time until he'd already missed the window. Store didn't have crew ready to unload him. He sat in the parking lot for 6 hours. Cascading failure caused by a rigid system that refused to listen to the person holding the steering wheel. I realized then that Broadwell was trying to force the chaotic reality of the physical world into neat spreadsheet boxes. Impossible. You can't schedule a flat tire. You can't create a policy for a flash flood. That was the foundation of the Rapid Replenishment Division. Not a department I found, a philosophy I built from the ground up. I went to the executive board with a proposal that terrified them. I asked for a division that operated outside standard reporting structure. I asked for authority to break the rules. I built the division on 3 non-negotiable principles. First, we prioritized the exception over the data. If a store manager called screaming they were out of water before a hurricane, we didn't check inventory forecasts to see if they were entitled to more. We sent the truck. We moved product first, fixed paperwork later. In retail, a lost sale is gone forever. Second, I pushed decision-making power down to the floor. I gave warehouse supervisors authority to override shipping routes without asking permission from VPs. If Preston in Ohio saw a storm coming, he could reroute trucks south without waiting for an email approval chain that would take longer than the storm itself. Third, I established that relationships are infrastructure. This was the part Mason and his consultants could never understand. They saw logistics as trucks, trains, warehouses. I saw it as a web of favors and trust. I spent years cultivating a network that didn't exist on any organizational chart. I knew dispatchers at major trucking firms by their first names. I sent Christmas gifts to union reps at ports. I remembered that the operations manager at our biggest supplier had a son with leukemia, and I asked about him every time we spoke. This wasn't just being polite, it was strategic. When a rail strike threatened to freeze our inventory on the East Coast, I made 3 phone calls while our competitors were reading force majeure clauses. I had my containers moved onto private chassis and driven out before picket lines went up. I didn't get that capacity because Broadwell paid the most. I got it because 2 years prior, I'd helped that trucking company owner out of a bind when he was cash poor. That's infrastructure. Invisible, unquantifiable, and the only thing that works when the world breaks. The true test came during the pandemic. The entire country shut down. Demand patterns flipped overnight. People stopped buying clothes, started hoarding toilet paper and cleaning supplies. The global supply chain, built for efficiency and predictability, collapsed under panic. At Broadwell, the automated replenishment systems imploded. Algorithms looked at what happened last year to predict next week. But last year there was no plague. Computers kept ordering swimsuits while dry goods aisles were barren. My team didn't panic. We'd spent 15 years rehearsing for chaos. We switched to manual override, set up a command center, lived there for 6 months. We stopped using standard carriers who were overwhelmed and activated the secondary network I'd nurtured. We used local courier services to move essential goods between stores. We bypassed distribution centers entirely and had suppliers ship directly to supermarket back doors. We worked 18-hour days. I ate stale sandwiches from vending machines for dinner, slept on a cot more nights than in my own bed. But while other retailers were rationing water and closing doors, Broadwell stayed open. We had stock. We kept the country fed and supplied. But there was a price. There's always a price. I missed 19 years of dinners. I missed the moment my marriage dissolved into polite roommate arrangement before ending in quiet divorce. I missed seeing my son Spencer grow from a boy who needed me to tuck him in to a man who calls once a month out of obligation. I remember one Thanksgiving I was supposed to be carving turkey. Instead, I was in the garage negotiating with a frozen food supplier in Wisconsin. My family ate without me. I justified it all. Told myself I was building something durable. Thought I was weaving a safety net stronger than steel. Believed that by solving problems that kept the CEO awake at night, I was making myself indispensable. I was wrong. The morning after they fired me, the sun came up over Dallas with offensive brightness. I sat at my kitchen island with coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My company laptop was gone. My badge was gone. The rhythmic ping of Outlook notifications that had been the soundtrack of my life for 19 years was silent. Then at 7:12 a.m., my personal cell phone began to buzz. West Texas area code. I recognized it immediately. Brady Davis, a dispatcher for one of our legacy carriers in the Southwest. "This is Logan," I said. "Logan, thank God," Brady's rough voice said. "Listen, I'm stuck at the gate in El Paso. System's flagging the load because fuel surcharge is 4% over standard cap. Guard says he can't let the driver in without a variance code." I closed my eyes. Standard issue. Usually, I'd approve the variance in 10 seconds and the truck would roll. Brady, I can't help you. Come on, Logan, I have a driver who's been driving 11 hours. He's timing out. If he doesn't dock in 20 minutes, he has to take a 10-hour break. I don't work for Broadwell anymore. The silence was heavier than the silence in my kitchen. Since when? Since last night. It happened again and again. A packaging supplier in Georgia, a warehouse supervisor from Reno. They weren't asking for policy, they were asking for permission. The one thing the new algorithm couldn't give them: courage. I stopped answering after the 5th call, but the phone didn't stop. It was a domino effect. One delayed decision in El Paso affected a delivery in Phoenix. A missed window in Reno caused a stockout in Sacramento. The network was going into cardiac arrest because the pacemaker had been ripped out. Around 11 a.m., Colton Shaw called. Regional manager for the Mountain West District. Good guy, 20-year veteran. Logan, he whispered from his car. I just walked out of a store in Denver. Shelves in the dairy aisle are at 40%. It's a Tuesday. Why? Automated ordering system cut the forecast because of a holiday anomaly from 3 years ago. I tried to manually up the order. System locked me out. I sent 6 emails to the new central planning team. You know what I got back? A link to a dashboard showing forecast accuracy is 99%. They're celebrating the model's accuracy while I'm looking at empty shelves. We hung up. I knew the call was coming. I knew Mason would have to reach out. My phone rang at 1:15 p.m. Mason Torres. Logan! Mason's voice boomed through the speaker. Bright, cheerful, sickeningly warm. Hope you're enjoying your first day of freedom. Mason, it's been less than 1 day. Surely the automated future you promised the board hasn't arrived ahead of schedule. Mason laughed. We're seeing some minor noise in the system, teething pains. I wanted to reach out because there's an opportunity here for us to bridge the gap gracefully. What kind of opportunity? A consulting arrangement. Short-term contract, 3 months. You'd come back as an advisor to the transition team. Premium rate, triple your previous hourly. We just need you to answer the phone when regional managers get confused. I saw the trap immediately. It wasn't a job offer, it was an insurance policy for him. In this role, if a warehouse manager calls me at 2 a.m. because a truck is stuck and I tell him to reroute the fleet, who signs off on that decision? We'd want you to provide the recommendation. Final execution would go through the Central Planning Committee. We need data integrity. So I make the recommendation, but I don't have authority to execute it. Consultants advise. Management decides. I see. So if I give advice and the committee ignores it and the shipment is late, who gets the blame? And if the committee follows it but the outcome is bad because the situation changed, who gets blamed then? Mason was silent. You want me to be the face of the chaos. You want to use my credibility to buy yourself time, but you're not giving me the keys. You're asking me to take the heat if we crash. You're being cynical. I'm being operational. I can't fix a broken supply chain if I have to ask permission to buy a roll of tape. If you want me back, I need full autonomy over rapid replenishment. I need ability to override software without committee votes. That's impossible. That goes against the restructuring mandate. Then you don't need me. You need a miracle. Logan, think about your legacy. Do you want to watch 19 years of work fall apart because you were too proud to help? It's falling apart because you fired the people who held it together. Good luck with the transition, Mason. I hung up. First time in my career I'd hung up on a CEO. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. Screenshot of an email sent to the entire operations team. Communication protocol. External interference. It warned against reaching out to former employees for guidance, calling it a violation of company policy. They weren't just firing me, they were quarantining me. An hour later, Mason called again. The friendly tone was gone. You built a cult of personality at Broadwell. I have managers telling me they can't function without your approval. That's dysfunction. You created dependency on purpose so you'd be untouchable. I created a system that worked when the power went out. A system that runs on favors and backroom deals is a liability. We're a Fortune 100 company. We run on metrics. I will not let you hold this company hostage because you're bitter about being redundant. I'm sitting in my kitchen. You're the one calling me. Be very careful, Logan. You know the terms of your separation. At 4 p.m., the legal threat arrived. Email from Broadwell General Counsel with formal letter attached. Post-employment obligations and non-interference. They'd trapped me. If I answered calls to help drivers, I was interfering and could be sued. But if I didn't answer, shipments would fail and Mason would blame me for abandoning the team. I made a decision. For the next 3 days, I maintained disciplined silence. I watched my phone ring. I watched names scroll across the screen. Each missed call was a problem compounding, but I forced myself to let the screen go dark. On Friday evening, my son Spencer called from Portland. "Hey, Dad. I saw the news. Trade journals are picking up rumors about operational friction at Broadwell. I imagine they are. Are you okay? Really okay? I'm sitting in my garden drinking iced tea. I haven't looked at a spreadsheet in 4 days." "That sounds terrifying," he joked, then serious. "Dad, I've been thinking about what I said about technology. I didn't mean to imply what you did wasn't valuable. You were right about the direction the world is going, Spencer. You just forgot that the world still has potholes. Do you regret not taking their consulting offer? You could have made easy money." I looked out at the oak tree, in my backyard, swaying in the wind. "I have my reputation, Spencer. My reputation is that I tell the truth. If I took that money, I'd be selling a lie. I'd be helping them pretend a calculator can replace a conscience." "You're tough, Dad. Stubborn as hell, but tough." After we hung up, I felt a shift. I wasn't just an unemployed executive, I was a witness. I went to my study and opened a notebook. I mapped out the invisible anatomy of Broadwell's supply chain. I wrote down things that weren't in databases. The bridge in Arkansas that freezes first in December. The port manager in Houston who hates emails but loves Tuesday morning phone calls. This was proof of my value, the blueprint of a machine only I knew how to operate. Then I updated my resume. I deleted the weak objective about seeking a challenging role. Instead, operations executive specializing in high-complexity logistics and crisis management. I build resilient systems that prioritize execution over theory. I don't manage dashboards. I manage outcomes. I wasn't preparing to ask for a job. I was preparing to select a partner. It was past midnight when I checked email one last time. One new message. The sender was Lindsay Harper, VP of Finance at Broadwell, steel-spined accountant who'd survived 3 CEO transitions. We'd never been friends, but we had mutual respect. The subject line was blank, no text in the body, only a PDF attachment with a random file name. I hesitated. Opening this could be dangerous. But Lindsay didn't send traps. Lindsay sent facts. I clicked. It was a scanned slide deck. Project Horizon, Strategic Logistics Partnership Phase 1, dated 3 weeks before my termination. As I scrolled through it, I realized the automation story was a lie. This wasn't about technology. It was about financial engineering, a demolition order disguised as a business plan. The first section detailed extending vendor payment terms from 30 to 90 days, squeezing small trucking companies until they suffocated. The next slide was even worse, reducing target fulfillment from 98% to 92%. They'd calculated exactly how much disappointment customers would tolerate before shopping elsewhere. They were planning to fail 8% of the time on purpose because it was cheaper than succeeding. Then I found the real smoking gun. The appendix detailed outsourcing logistics coordination to Apex Logistics Solutions. I knew that name. I opened a browser and searched. Apex was owned by Highland Creek Capital. Mason Torres had served on Highland Creek's advisory board for 3 years before joining Broadwell. It was so simple. Mason wasn't just cutting costs. He was steering a multi-million-dollar contract to a company owned by his former associates. He was gutting Broadwell's capabilities to pump up the valuation of a company he had financial interest in. The email from Lindsay contained one sentence in white text. "You should see this." I wasn't just looking at incompetence, I was looking at corruption. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown Washington area code. Arthur Sterling, chairman of Broadwell's audit committee, 70 years old, former undersecretary of commerce, the only board member Mason actually feared. "Mr. Mitchell, I trust you are well. I'm going to be in Atlanta tomorrow. I'd like to buy you coffee." Strictly off the record, we met at a quiet hotel bar. Arthur looked older than I remembered, wearing an expensive but tired gray suit. "Mason tells us the disruption is due to lack of standardization in your legacy model," Arthur said, getting straight to the point. He calls it hero-based logistics. I pulled out the slide deck Lindsay had sent. I pointed to the decision to push vendor payment terms to 90 days. You can't run a supply chain on 90-day terms in this economy. When you did this, you forced 60% of your trucking capacity to quit. That's not legacy drag, that's a self-inflicted wound. I flipped to the appendix about Apex Logistics. This is where the money's going. You're paying a premium for a third-party provider to manage a mess that the payment terms created. You broke the leg so you could buy a crutch from a company Mason knows very well. Arthur put on his reading glasses, studied the slides. His eyes were cold. Be careful, Logan. That's a serious implication. I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you the math. Look at the expedited fees. You're bleeding cash to Apex while your shelves are empty. I leaned forward. The real problem is paralysis. In logistics, the plan is always wrong. When that happens, you need someone with authority to say go. Mason fired everyone who had that authority. He replaced them with a dashboard that waits for approval, and while the dashboard waits, the truck sits. And while the truck sits, the customer goes to your competitors. Arthur sat in silence, looking at the evidence. Finally, may I keep this? It's your company's document. I'm just returning it to you. Arthur stood. He looked like a man who'd just realized his house's foundation was made of sand. The record will be corrected, he said quietly. 3 days later, the news alert popped up on my phone. Broadwell Retail Group CEO Mason Torres placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. Stock price tumbles 14%. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like victory. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing that when the storm hits, you're the one holding the wheel. The truth always finds a way to surface. And that was enough.